Hello and welcome back to Streamer Consciousness. This is Gid, pre-podcast Gid, as as once again I'm having to do an intro to let you guys know out there, especially you audio listeners, that this is a two-part episode. So I got to talk to the wonderful Jorbs for an extended period of time, which meant that there was space for us to do two parts for the podcast, which is awesome. I really hope you enjoy. He had a ton of amazing stuff to talk about and is one of the sweetest men I know. So please do take it upon yourselves to enjoy the episode. I hope you have a great time, and I'm going to let us get into it now. Okay, goodbye. And also hello. Hello and welcome back to Streamer Consciousness, a podcast designed to talk about a person's thoughts and conscious reactions to events perceived as a continuous flow. My name is Gideon. I go by Gidawid. Here on not only YouTube and Spotify and wherever else we are, all over the net, but we also have Streamer Consciousness on Spotify and stuff. As you can tell, every week I don't plan this intro, and that has that long may it continue to be a mess. As I say hi to to our guest this week, we have the one and only. A man who has taken the word strategy and applied the word games properly behind it, and has been doing so throughout the last 8 years of his streaming career. He has not only amassed a whopping 93,000 followers on Twitch, but over 25 million views on Twitch and YouTube combined. It is the one and only Jorbs. Thank you very much for being here. Do appreciate it.
That's a lot of views. Wow, I had no idea.
There's a ton of views, isn't it?
No problem.
I think it's fascinating as well when I sort of do the research for that stuff, and I at no point do I ever have a number in my head going in to check, but you know, you've amassed over 4.5 million views on Twitch alone, and then over 21 million views on your YouTube stuff.
YouTube drives those numbers up. I wonder how many of them tuned out in 15 seconds. They're like, this is boring.
But in terms of that, does that at any point put things into perspective for you about just how long you've been doing this as a career, and how did it make you feel hearing that you've amassed over 25 million views in your career so far?
I think at some point the number doesn't mean anything anymore. That's too big a number for me to understand. I sometimes will take a step back while I'm streaming, and I have 2,000 viewer live audience or whatever is pretty typical for me, and realize that that's like more than the number of people who went to high school with me. So it'd be like if every single person at my high school plus more were sitting in some sort of audience watching me. And I remember how nervous I was in high school talking to like 10 people at once. Like if I had to give a presentation in class, that would be on my mind the night before, and waiting to go, I'd be like getting sweaty and stuff before the teacher called on me and everything, and all stressed out. And now it's just like completely automatic. My brain definitely does not understand what's happening anymore. It just doesn't get it. It's just what I do.
For sure. And you do it very well. I'd love to backtrack a little and just ask you to do like a little introduction of who you are, and also tell us your socials on social media as well, so I can put those on the screen at the beginning for people to be able to follow you there. Yeah,
I'm Joe in Ribs on a lot of my socials, because back in the day I was in between Jorbs. So it's JOINRBS. It's a silly, like, visual wordplay pun. Because when I was 12, a 14-year-old girl said that she thought that was a silly joke, and I was like, nice, I know how to be impressive now. I know what 14-year-old girls like. And that's now my brand. So I changed to Jorbs at some point, but I am twitter.com/JohnRibs, youtube.com/JohnRibs, twitch.tv/Jorbs. For me, gaming, strategy gaming, started when I was 3 or 4 or something. My parents lived next door to their parents, well, my mother's parents, my grandparents. And my parents were very busy. My mother was in a PhD program for economics. My dad had just graduated with a master's in computer science and that was a good time in history to learn about computers, for what it's
sure.
worth. Yeah, so he had a lot of stuff to do and has been very busy since. Um, and so I got left with my grandfather, who had afternoons off, and he would just sit in his office and hang out with me, basically. And there were a bunch of different board games for me to play. He usually wouldn't actually play with me. He'd just, like, we had some dog fight game where you drew a hand of cards and like you could maneuver your plane, and then your opponent had a hand of cards and they removed their plane. You tried to shoot each other, and I'd play that with myself as a like little 4-year-old me. Probably didn't actually understand the rules. My favorite thing though was my granddad. He wasn't an evangelical Christian in any way. He was like the most opposite you can be of that almost. He didn't believe that he should talk about his faith to other people. He thought that they should find faith on their own. And he would sit in his office reading this really big book with tiny text, and I didn't know what it was until 10 years later. I worked out it was his Bible. Like, he's just sitting there reading the Bible for hours while I'm doing this. And he gave me my own big book, but he wasn't gonna like indoctrinate me on Bible stories or whatever. So he gave me 500 Grandmaster games of chess. And I learned chess notation, king to d4, and all this stuff. I learned what that meant at the same time as I was learning to read English, and would just sit there working through the chess games for an hour in the afternoon while I waited for my parents to get home from work. And that was the start of it for me. And when I'm playing strategy games, that's still sort of what it is for me. It's me being in this like very safe, very loving, meditative space, just pouring all of my attention into this incredible, enrapturing thing. And it's crazy for me to look at that journey, and now 25 plus years later, I'm like friends with Peter Fiedler, like 8 times national Russian chess champion, super grandmaster. We just chat. And so I've gone from these games being something completely like almost religious significance, almost. That's sort of the placement that they were given to me. I've gone from them being these incredible, crazy things to being something that I'm actually sort of part of this creation of this sort of strategy content. And I'm not a chess player, but when people talk about Slay the Spire or other games that I play, often if someone asks who's the best person to go to learn this game, they'll say Jorbs. And that's really cool. So
Absolutely.
started there, went through Magic the Gathering in high school, went to poker in college, which felt a lot. I like made like $3 an hour playing Magic in high school, which is like very weird. It was a hobby and a recreational thing for me, but also it's a game where you pay to enter a tournament and then you win prizes at the end. And so I was like making $3 an hour playing games, and as a high schooler, I was like, oh yeah, this is cool. I'm a gamer professionally. I bought myself, well, basically nothing, because that isn't very much money. But then I found out that if you play poker, applying the same skill set as you do to Magic, you're now making like $100 an hour. And so I was studying classics in college, which is, I mean, it taps into the same tradition. Classics is about looking at this gigantic body of work, this huge book full of incredible things, and trying to understand it. And I was massively enjoying that in college, and it's still a passion of mine. But I was trying to get my degree, and I was thinking I'd get a like PhD and become a lecturer for classics or something. That was going to be my life. And I realized I was making twice that playing poker after class already. Like, the money just didn't make sense. So maybe that's somewhere I go back to in 10 years, retire and just go back to analyzing every single line of the Iliad that describes someone dying and making spreadsheets about it, which is something I enjoy doing. But for now, I did poker, and then after poker, I slid slowly into streaming strategy games, and I now make comparable or more money streaming than I did making poker or playing poker. So it's a career, and it's been my life basically. It's very easy for me to see from the beginning to the end how I got here.
There's so much that we can unpack from what you've just said in terms of, I really love the fact that your Bible, quote unquote, was a book on chess, and how, having known you now for, I don't know, probably about 6 months, I'd say that I've had the pleasure of meeting you. It's firstly, it's very weird because I'd got introduced to Slay the Spire maybe a year or two ago by some friends who said it was a fun game. And, you know, I've never really been into deck building, never had the understanding of it all, because I like to hoard things. So for me, it was like, let me pick up all the cards and then I will be stronger because I have all the cards. So I've never really understood
just throw the entire deck at them.
So I never really had the strategy down for that, but more so it was like, okay, let me give this a go. And the first time I streamed it, I beat the boss, and I was like, whoa, I did it. Like, it was the dog thing. I don't know the names, but
yeah,
with the 2 lives, the Awakened. So I managed to beat that, obviously not knowing there was a big heart that you have to destroy at the end of that game. But yes, that for me was like, whoa, maybe I can do this. And then I looked it up on YouTube, and I found you, and I saw your over-explained videos, and you were going into the details of, okay, well, this card can be used, this amount is going to give you a 4% chance of this happening if you use this. If this then comes into play, then you're going to have to remove these factors because these factors come in. And suddenly I was like, yes, I shouldn't pick up all the cards, maybe. And it was at that point that I got very interested in the strategy behind it, because my experience, I guess, of strategy games was very limited in actual strategy. I really loved Final Fantasy Tactics back in the day, but there was no tactic apart from move the piece forward, on the board or in the game. And I think that's just from not understanding the rule set. But I also was introduced to chess when I was younger, not in the same capacity, but I really loved playing games. And I think from that, seeing you enjoy the strategy aspect and teaching people that, I think that's why when we met, it was suddenly like, oh my goodness, like I know this guy, and nobody in here is really reacting to the fact that I know this guy. It's one of those weird experiences, I think, having a little fangirl moment over meeting someone that other people are just having as a normal everyday experience.
Yeah, well, that's always how it goes, is you can know someone because you know them and you're like friends, you're just people. Or you can know someone because like they're this thing on YouTube and you watch their videos and you're not really conceiving them of just like a normal person yet. They're like something else, whether you're a fan of theirs or even a critic of theirs. Like if you're online writing, oh, I hate that guy, he's so boring or whatever. And then if you actually get in the room with them and they have the time and interest in getting to know you, we're all just humans, That's what keeps on striking me anytime I meet anybody in streaming and content creation. And there are so many people in strategy gaming that I am in awe of, and I've been watching them perform in poker or chess or whatever for 30 years, and then you meet them and they're just a person.
For sure. In terms of, you mentioned that you were playing Magic in high school for about $3 an hour. I was selling sweets at school for probably double that So I just
nice.
want to lay that down. You know, the candy business, the sweet business was booming back then because you could buy
so true.
You could buy a tub of they were called atomic wastes, which were like these really sour candies, and the lemon ones were, people loved them because they were not only the strongest, but I could inflate the value on those massively because they were wanted so badly. And then I'd use the tub of the atomic wastes as my money pot to put the money in once it was finished for the day. So that was my business acumen, I guess, back then, was doing that, and we'd play a lot of cards.
Still true, of course. Still true. It's the strategy gamers are not making as much as the businessmen in the world. It's still the case.
But yeah, you mentioned obviously bumping into not only a chess hero, but saying about how you have people that you look up to in the poker world. Was there anybody in particular that you really love watching, or were there things that you learned particularly off of certain poker players, or anything that caught your eye in that regard?
Poker was so. I don't know how much you know about the online poker boom, but certainly a lot of people in the audience won't. So poker was something that you played in a grimy casino with smoking at the table, and then you took your cash and got mugged when you were trying to get to your car out back in the late 1900s. Late 1900s, that sounds so weird to say.
Back in like the 80s.
Yeah. People, there you go. That's how a normal person says that.
People would play and then they'd win, and then they were not allowed to win. So they would be beaten up and their money would be swiftly taken back to the place.
Or the game would be rigged. It was, it's sort of a Wild West thing. Yes. The beginnings of Hold'em in the US. And then the World Series of Poker came along and started to really legitimize it a lot. And the main event was the crowning achievement to win this gargantuan 100-player no limit hold'em tournament. And so that went along for a while, and the internet comes up and starts making waves, and people realize you can make poker sites where people deposit money and play poker online, and you can make a lot of money doing that because you can take a percentage of the pot every time they play a pot. And they offer tournaments where if you win the tournament, you get entered into the World Series of Poker main event. So a guy named Chris Moneymaker, ridiculous, how do you have that name and be in this story? I don't know. But Chris Moneymaker won a tournament, got invited to the main event, went to the main event, and he made it all the way to the final table. And he's sitting there in the final two, and it's him, this very a guy who looks like he'd be at home sitting behind a computer screen at home, just like a very normal looking computer guy. And he's at the same table as Sami Farha, he's dressed to the nines. He's got this perfectly fitted suit. He's smoking a cigar. He's the old guard. He's that traditional poker player, the slinger. And they're table talking and everything. And Chris Moneymaker eventually manages to win. And it blew up. It was absolutely huge. And all of the strategy gamers, pretty much in my generation, saw this happen. And all of a sudden we were looking at poker and we were all thinking, oh, this is a strategy game. If you understand the strategy here, you can win money. And not just a small amount of money, because everyone was seeing this happen at the same time. It was on ESPN over and over again, reruns, and it became a part of pop culture. You could make a lot of money. And so that's where I entered poker, and I entered as the strategy gamer. I didn't enter as someone who was on the outside looking in and seeing celebrity. I entered as someone who was in the trenches in the forums talking to the people who were developing the newest tactics. And you haven't heard of most of them because they didn't go win the World Series of Poker main event. They made millions of dollars playing cash games online, mostly remaining anonymous, because what's the point of...
Yeah.
They're not content creators. They're strategy gamers going to work for 40 plus hours a week. And then they retired and or like some of them are lifestyle coaches now. Some of them invested in Bitcoin so they can do whatever they want. Some of them,
God bless those people,
started doing film stuff. So yeah, I still know a lot of those guys, and they're just sort of spread out in the world. Some of them are doing pretty cool things. Some of them are still doing some poker. Obviously, I ended up streaming as a strategy gamer, which is something I did. Yeah, it was a really, really, really cool time in my life to see all of these people, young in their 20s, smart, being handed tons of money so they could like do whatever they wanted with it.
Yeah.
And sitting there wondering, it was always on my mind. Poker is a very soulless game. There isn't much that you create of value by playing poker. You just like, if someone is at the table enjoying themselves with you, that's awesome. And like, you know, if they lose money to you while they're enjoying themselves, that's sort of okay. It's like, okay, so they paid $100 to have fun for the night. That's not completely unreasonable.
Yeah.
Sometimes people are at the table because they're drunk and upset and spewing off thousands of dollars, and that's very ethically problematic. One of the reasons that I don't play poker anymore. But yeah, poker doesn't create much value. So while I was dedicating, I pretty much played poker for 3 years of my life completely full time. While I was dedicating all that time in my life to poker, I was often thinking, where are all of these really smart people I'm meeting and getting to know going to be in 10 years? What are they going to do with all this money that they're getting given and all of this empowerment? They're being reaffirmed, basically. They're being told they're smart, they can succeed in the world if they apply themselves. What are they going to do? And I was really worried that they wouldn't do anything. But for the most part, all of the people who I've met through poker are now just doing really cool things. So that's made me happy. That's
awesome. I think the interesting thing about poker, having been the online poker player as well, nowhere near the strategy side of it, but I watched a lot of the World Series back in the day. Mainly because of my brother. My brother was really into poker, and he was the one that would play sort of online and stuff like that. And I was more introduced where, you know, I'd enter the sort of $200 tournaments, and then I might come second or win, and then I'd be on that high and go into the next tournament, and I'd lose it all. And it would be like, okay, there goes the strategy. Like, I spent 2 hours putting all that work in to immediately then blow it on not thinking through what was actually happening. And I can completely understand what you're saying about it being a soulless game, because playing online, it was very much you playing against the cards and seeing the percentages of outcomes, whereas you're not getting a Phil Hellmuth at the table screaming across Doyle Brunson or whoever. You know, it's a very different game, I guess, watching it online, or watching it on TV. And I think that's what you were saying about legitimizing the game. It brought all these characters to the forefront of the reality TV that it was. So I completely agree with you in terms of the fact that when Chris Moneymaker won, it definitely changed the game for a lot of people. But yeah, no, it's really interesting to hear that your natural progression from there was to think about where they'd be 10 years from now. And did you expect to be where you are now, I guess? 10 years removed pretty much from what you were doing?
I think it's not surprising to me looking back, but I wouldn't say that I expected it. I've been streaming full time for 3 years, but I've been dabbling in content creation for half of my life, at least. And even when I was a poker player, when I was sitting at the tables and not really feeling like I was interacting in any valuable way with any human being for 8 hours of the day, which is draining, I'd spend another couple of hours like looking for students to coach or talking with people about strategy in forums or on video calls or whatever, or making a video blog. I guess we call them vlogs now, but making a vlog about my poker playing. Like I was there was definitely a part of my soul that was screaming out, I want to create joy in the world. And then I was sitting at the table for 8 hours repressing it, and it would like just leak out at the seams. It's really fun. I worked, I'm pretty sure in January of 2011 I worked 300 hours. And in that month, with the limited free time that I had, I spent my time creating content about poker. Like, I just worked more, but like I needed some proportion of that time I was spending working to be putting something useful into the world somehow. So given that, I've always enjoyed this, and I've always felt like it's very valuable and very valid and very rewarding. So I'm not too surprised that I ended up here. But after poker, I didn't go here immediately either. I went back to school. I have dropped out of college twice. So I went back to school and I was like, I'll finish my undergrad in classics and get a master's in statistics, and then I can take this passion I have for strategy and apply it to something in the real world with my degree. And like exactly the same thing happened basically. Like I was working my way toward my degree, and then I started streaming, and I was like, wait, I can make more money streaming. And also it's just like more fun, honestly. I also like tried volunteering in game design. I worked on Long War 2, which is a mod for XCOM 2, which is a like very flagship strategy gaming franchise, XCOM. And the publishers, XCOM 1 had a very popular mod called Long War 1, and it was so popular that the publishers of XCOM 2 got in touch with the people who made Long War 1 and were like, hey, do you want to like officially make Long War 2? And we'll like actually release it as an official thing. And so I got involved in that because I was someone who was playing and making strategy videos and stuff for Long War 1, got invited to come on to the team as a balance tester. And that was incredibly rewarding, incredibly fun. Maybe in some other timeline I end up as a game designer, you know? But with how the cards fell, I guess well, what actually happened is Long War 2 released, and I was the person best situated in the world to make content for it, essentially, because I had just been balance testing it for 6 months. So I fired up the stream and I was like, hey, here's the new game. I can explain everything about it to you and take you through. I can make tutorialized content. I can make in-depth content. I can publish a playthrough of it where I'm the first person in the world to beat it. And lots of people tuned in and were really excited about that because they cared about the game or because they cared about seeing someone being excellent at a strategy anything. And that was that. I jumped from like a streamer who streamed part-time to 15 viewers to having 200 regular viewers, and then it just keeps going up if you keep working really hard, I guess, has been my experience so far. So
yeah, XCOM is a game that obviously has a ton of strategy to it, and I feel as though it's always really amazing to me that you have all these people that are quote unquote cracked when it comes to playing like FPS shooters, and there will always be people that have that amazing reaction speed, and you can watch them play those fast games and stuff, and watching you play strategy games is the equivalent of watching somebody get an ace in Valorant. It's like watching somebody's mind work at such a pace that a lot of the time the Twitch chat doesn't recognize that you already know the answer. And I think that's what is always fascinating about watching you. Again, I'm not saying this to just big you up for the sake of it, but you know, it's incredibly impressive to see how your mind decodes whatever situation you get put in a way that you will sit there, ask yourself the rhetorical question of, hey, what do I need to do in this situation? But you're talking to yourself, not to the chat who feel like they know the answer. And I feel I can only relate to that really in playing Dead by Daylight, where there will be moments. Obviously, I've played that game for 4,000 hours, and I know that I need to get from point A to point B in this amount of time. So therefore, I need to drop this pallet here. I need to force the killer back on themselves. I'm going to give myself this much space to do this. And what's impressive is seeing you do it in different games. It's not just you being able to impressively do it in Slay the Spire, which, you know, we'll get on to talking about, but watching you do it consistently across the games that you pick up, and how fast you pick up the methodology behind what you need to do to be as efficient as you can be. I think that's what really drives home the viewership, is that you're watching somebody's brain work really fast. So I think that's always been really impressive. Is there something
funny?
Oh yeah, go on.
It's funny that you frame it like that, because I'm not gonna, like, you said lots of nice things about me, and I appreciate it. And definitely my brain works really fast at some things.
Mm-hmm.
But also, one of the biggest, most crucial things about succeeding in strategy games versus succeeding in first-person shooter type games is you have to slow down. You can't let your intuitive response to things rule what you do, because it will be wrong. We just haven't, like, when you're playing a first-person shooter, you train yourself so your intuitive response is right. And some of that hooks directly into things in our brain, like you're using your eyes to target something and click on it, which is hand-eye coordination and things. These are things that the human body is built to be able to do, and your body has evolved to be able to coordinate the hands and eyes for millions of years. But when you're talking about strategy games, there is not much in your body that innately plays chess. Like, the human body just doesn't really have systems in it that play chess that well. There are things in your brain, for sure. But a lot of this is how exactly you are training yourself deliberately, and how exactly, when you're faced with something you don't know yet, you're letting your brain slow down and work, and letting systems that you've created for doing this do their thing. So yeah, that's, I think, the biggest thing that differentiates staying however good you are at strategy games and becoming better at strategy games is when you have a decision and you think you know the answer in 1 second, do you think about it for another 5 seconds before you actually do something? Or do you think about it for another 5 minutes? Or do you finish your game and then think about it for another 5 hours? The more that you're thinking and refining and understanding which factors went into what here, the more you're going to improve. And it's never about being the best. It's about improving and being your best. And so that's generally, that's the longer version of the answer I have when somebody asks me, like, why didn't you do this? The answer is like, well, I don't know exactly, but I thought really hard, and I've been thinking really hard for 30 years. And
it's relatable.
It's very nebulous. Very nebulous.
I can't remember if it's a famous quote. And again, maybe I've just got it wrong all these years, but there was something to do with a good chess player thinks 5 moves ahead. A great chess player thinks 1 move ahead. Because logically, it's not about the moves that haven't existed yet. It's about recognizing that the move that comes back at you is going to be the move you have to then process and break down, because you could pick every move out there and say, hey, I have a move for this if this happens, but realistically you need to know what's coming back as to how you're going to respond to the next move. And I think that's always stuck with me about strategy is a lot of people always want to feel like they're 5 moves ahead rather than just being prepared for the next move that actually matters.
Yeah. And every move in chess is all the other moves too. Like anytime someone makes 1 move on the chessboard, every other move that can go from there is contained in it. It's called a game tree, is the game theoretical term for this. But Yeah, just because you're only making one move doesn't mean that you don't have to think about there's one move and then wait. This is an incomputable number of things after that one move that can happen. There's no computer that can track everything. The number of bits that you would need to track everything in the chess game tree is larger than the universe. It's too big.
In terms of you've talked about slowing down when it comes to strategy and taking beyond that 1 second of thinking you know the answer to having those 5 seconds to go, but is it the answer? I've definitely seen it a lot in terms of watching you play Slay the Spire, whereby you might be on 1 HP and people in the chat say this is over, the game is done, and you take that extra few minutes to be like, hang on, is it? And it's incredible the amount of times that you manage to survive those situations when everybody else sees it as a loss. So I'd love to ask you about Slay the Spire in terms of how many hours you have in the game and what is it that keeps you coming back for those that don't know what Slay the Spire is.
Sure. I think I have... It depends how you count. I think I've streamed Slay the Spire for 3,000 to 4,000 hours, but I have 5,500 hours in the game alongside streaming it. I've created YouTube content for it. I've created a mod character for it, and I'm working on a second. I've done other stuff too. Slay the Spire is a deck builder. One of the reasons that I can apply the same pattern of thinking from one game to the next is that they're all sort of the same game. So you start at the beginning, you have a very basic set of cards that you draw from your deck, and they let you fight enemies. You can hit them, you can block the damage that they try to deal to you. It's basically what your cards do at the start. And then as you beat enemies, you progress up a spire, and the enemies drop rewards, so you get to add more cards to your deck, which start to do different things. Now, instead of just hitting them and blocking them, you can also draw more cards, or you can draw more energy to play more cards this turn, or you can do some really weird stuff. Like you could spend 3 energy to make it so you hold on to your block from this turn until next turn. And is that good or not? I don't know. It starts to get pretty complicated to work that out. The enemies also start to get more complicated. They stop just hitting you and start doing weird things like putting cards in your deck that don't do anything when drawn, or dealing damage to you every time you play a card. Or instead of one of them, there's 5 of them in this fight, and they're all attacking you at the same time. And so it's this game which starts with a very basic concept. You have a deck, you draw cards out of it, you hit the enemy, you block their damage, and then creates all of this complexity, branching complexity as you go through the run, which you're never going to... Nobody's brain is ever going to understand all of it. It's too much. It's too complex. And so the thing that makes Slay the Spire so much fun to play is that it is a constant test of your belief about what happens in the game. I believe that if my deck is this and I go into this fight, well, I've never done it exactly like this before. Even in thousands of hours, the game's got enough variables and things that this is a new experience for me. But I believe that it will probably go about like this, based on all of my other experience playing the game. And then when I actually play the fight, it's the test. Did it actually happen like that? No, but I think I got a little bit unlucky on my draws, so probably my assumption was correct. I just wasn't recognizing how much luck was involved in this fight. Or maybe, yes, it went exactly like, oh, cool, that's a rewarding feeling when it just happens exactly like you think it will. And as you get more and more advanced at that, the decisions that you're making become so gratifying to make. Like, you're sitting at a store and you have 3 different potions you could buy, and the potions will let you do something, but they're only usable for one fight. And you're thinking, well, there are 3 particular enemies that seem difficult for this deck to beat. I'm most likely to face this particular one. I could buy a potion to help myself with that. Or maybe actually my deck can beat that one most of the time, and I should buy a potion to help me with the other two on the off chance that I face those. And when you make that decision, it's fun to make the decision because you're leveraging all of this knowledge that you have about the game. And when you make the decision and it actually like plays out and you are right, you feel really good. It's so cool. It's really cool to lose too in Slay the Spire. Like, it's cool to leverage all of that power of your brain and then go to the fight and just lose and be humbled and recognize that it's too big. Like, nobody is ever going to know it all. There's something beautiful and majestic about that. There was one other thing I was going to say and I've forgotten. Oh no. Oh well. Maybe it'll come back to me.
Hopefully. What I've always found incredible about that game is there are different ascensions that you can get through. You start off just going through the basic game. If you manage to beat the game, you might get to Ascension 1, and there's 20 of them, and they're debuffs on your run in terms of you have less potion slots than you did when you first started, or enemies are going to have more health, or you're going to have less health, and more cards are going to be added to your deck that make it harder for you to do what you want to achieve. And what I find so incredible about the game is the fact that when you first start, you feel like you need everything. You need all the potion slots. You need all the cards that you can have. You need all the health. And then you watch someone like you play it, whereby you're having 20% less health, or you've got less cards, and you know, you're down to 2 potion slots, and I'm sitting there thinking that 5 isn't enough, you know, or whatever. I think that's what's so great about it is like you said, it's incredibly gratifying to know that you've achieved more with less in that game and managed to overcome the adversity that's thrown at you. And I think another one of those big moments for me was when you can, I think it's gain an energy for not being able to see the enemy's intents. The enemies can't, you no longer know whether or not an enemy's going to attack you or going to throw a debuff on you or whatever they're going to do in the game. You can't see that any longer. Usually it's handed to you. And I think what was really incredible is when you start to process, I know what this enemy's going to do. I feel like I can do that throughout the entirety of the rest of this game?
Or if you can only guess 50-50 what it's going to do, can you find the play that beats both?
Yeah, it's fascinating. It really opened my eyes up to strategy gaming. And again, I can't remember how long ago it was now, but I sent you a picture of the list of different sort of perks that I'd acquired, the relics that I'd got, and was like, you know, here's a whole heap of different relics that I was like, I'm definitely going to beat the game with. And I know that you were going to sit there being like, this is like the best amount of relics you can have. And I managed to screw it up because I, again, got on top of myself where I was like, I'm invincible, you know? And I think that's kind of the beauty of the game in losing as well. Like you said, that it humbles you, knowing that you have all this quote unquote power, and yet, you know, a few wrong decisions and suddenly you're in the hole. And I think that's again, a similar feeling to poker, even though it's maybe more of a soulless game. There's less color in it, but there's definitely the same kind of level of, you can be humbled very quickly by the cards. And playing in person is one thing. You might be able to beat the guy that you're playing against based on your body language, your expression, the approach to the hand itself. You might be able to beat that person 90% of the time, but you can still be humbled by the cards 100% of the time. That doesn't change. And I think that's what's so incredible about that. If you could add another class to Slay the Spire, what class would you add and why?
You want to hear about my mod character?
I would love to.
So, I'm a very... Sometimes I have the creative energy and I want to create something new. Sometimes I don't. This is a thing about me, and perhaps why I wouldn't make it as a game designer, because I'm not someone who can force myself to sit down and create something when I don't feel like it. Streaming's easy because I have all of the people in chat to chat with, and they bring energy for me, and the game is a set framework and I just play it. So it's like you're on a conveyor belt and just going down it, clicking on the right buttons when you're a streamer almost. But creating a game it's very open, and you can do so many different things, and it's a much more open world experience. It's like Minecraft instead of Slay the Spire or something. At some point I did decide that I wanted to make a mod character for Slay the Spire, and for me it was less about me and more about my community. And there are so many cool people who watch my channel, or who I know from back when I played poker, or who are artists who have been making graphics for me or whatever. And I was like, hey, let's make a mod character together. This could be sweet. So I ended up, along with a lot of suggestions from my community and writers in my community who were suggesting storylines and stuff, coming up with this concept of a pair of explorers who enter the Spire, and they are young, and that's your first character. And the general mechanic of the character is that you actually have two characters, and so you have a lot of cards which do different things depending on which character is active right now, is the basic selling point. And they go through the Spire and try to defeat the final boss. And the lore of the Spire is that there's this whale of a god of vengeance, I believe is what Niao is. But yeah, there's this big whale just at the bottom, just like there's no water. It's just like sitting there in a room. It's very strange.
A whale with an F in a scar on his body, which I think is very...
I think her
body. Which is very key of the fact that every time I lose a run, I get reminded of the F.
Yes, F's in chat.
Every time.
So they meet the whale or whatever, and the whale's like, you must defeat the Spire. Go up the Spire and defeat it for me. And then if you die in the Spire, the whale resurrects you because it's a god, and you do it again. And it turns out if you defeat the Spire, the whale also resurrects you and tells you to do again. It's unfortunate. So you're stuck in this time loop sort of thing. And so they go up the Spire and defeat it, or fail to defeat it lots of times. And then eventually, like, one of them manages to find their way out, and the other one is just every time that you loop through, a piece of you dies or you lose something. And so it's a trilogy of characters, and that's the first character, is these two characters. And then the second character, which is actually made and playable, you can download it on Steam if you search for the Jorbs Wanderer trilogy or something like that, is called The Wanderer. And he's a wizard whose memories are gone, and so at the start of every fight, you sort of don't know where you are. But as you draw your cards, you start playing stuff, and you remember humility, or you remember diligence, or whatever. It's the 7 deadly sins and cardinal virtues are the 14 things that he can remember. Depending on which thing you're remembering right now, you get a certain bonus in the fight. And if you play a certain combination of cards, you'll gain clarity of this thing and have the bonus of that for the entire rest of the fight. And he's a pretty complex character. There's lots of stuff going on. It was really fun to design him. The artists who got involved were incredible, so a lot of the cards just look really good. I hired a video editor to make a hype trailer for the game, and someone did a metal cover of the Guardians theme, so I was able to get permission to use that for the trailer video, which is just really awesome and cool. We rewrote some of the events in the game, so some of the lore is a little bit different to incorporate him. We had like a full character sprite and everything. And then eventually all of the memories of it will come back to him in the fight and be too much, and he'll sort of like snap and deal a bunch of damage to himself and enemies as he sort of explodes in this magical energy. And so we got that changing to the character sprite, and then yeah, he's a playable character. A lot of people like him, which is really cool. And then the third character, which is the one I'm working on right now, is called Cull, and it's him plus another, how many thousand iterations, I don't know. No longer a human at all, just this like cruel ghost who only remembers hate and tries to kill everything, which is a different vibe. It's less wholesome, more cruel.
I think that sounds awesome. The idea of a character going through it with the intentions of sort of more of an evil aspect rather than the I need to quest to slay the Spire. I need to be victorious. The idea of going through it for separate reasons. What would be really interesting, and again, I'm just riffing here rather than anything else, would be the idea of maybe playing against somebody, going up the Spire, in terms of every action that you do maybe affects somebody else in like a two-player version of the game.
Like Tetris Battle
Like
Royale.
Tetris, yeah, exactly. Yeah. The idea of getting debuffed when they do something really good, and vice versa. I think that would be amazing. Again,
that'd be super cool for sure.
The amount of mechanics that I'm sure would get in your own way in terms of not only making the game for one person but for two would be astronomical. But a man can dream.
Oh, for sure. People do like races in Slay the Spire. So you start with the same seed, which you can choose to generate a random run at the start of your run, or you can write in like a 16-digit code and generate whatever that 16-digit code does. So people write in the same seed, and then they see who can beat the boss fastest.
Oh, wow.
Basically. So people are already doing that as a type of content creation. And if you added to that, like, well, this card, you not only put it in your deck and get its bonus, but also when you pick it, you debuff the other player in some way. I could imagine that being really sweet.
For sure. I the other thing that brings to my mind is I can't remember, it was a few weeks ago now in your chat, I mentioned the idea of VR, a version of Slay the Spire that wasn't just a side-by-side 2D, but a 3D enemy in front of you, and you have the cards hand in front of you, and you launch those cards out, and then they do it kind of like Digimon.
I love that.
That would be so awesome, and I really hope somebody out there listens to this and goes, that is a brilliant idea, because I really feel like the idea of something like that has so much room for expansion. That at some point we're going to have Pokemon games where it's VR and you throw the Pokemon out and you control them based on that.
I want to see that stuff.
I think
it's going to be so cool.
I think it's still crazy to me, the idea that people wrote off VR so quickly, and I understand it from the logic of, it's been a long time since Google Glass, for example, and their sort of failings, I guess, in terms of making glasses that would be available. But augmented reality has definitely picked up a lot more in terms of Pokemon Go and other stuff like that that's out there now. I think the fact that augmented reality has made such an impact, even on things like Instagram or Snapchat or whatever, you start to think about what you're adding to a picture. The fact is that I really think VR is something that people may discount now, but down the line is going to have its heyday, and I think there's going to be a lot of opportunities for really cool moments in games that are like deck builders and stuff, where they could really shine with the right kind of visuals.
Your mentioning of augmented pictures in Instagram brought back the thing I wanted to say about Slay the Spire, which is like, yeah, when you look at the world, like in Instagram, people are judging you based on who you are. Like, what do you look like? That's what I care about. Are you the person I want to press the like button on? When you play Slay the Spire, the game judges you based on what you do. And that's something that strategy games uniformly judge you on what you do. You win or lose based on your actions instead of your personality or character or background, or their strategy games don't discriminate a whole lot. There are small things still. They're not perfect. There's accessibility issues in strategy games sometimes. There are assumptions strategy games make about your upbringing where, like, for some people it might be natural to think that, oh yeah, a card is something, it's an object that does something, whereas other people have never, like, been introduced to this concept of a card, and so they come to the strategy game and don't know what's going on. That's all true. Strategy games aren't perfect. But in all of my life, there's never been anything that does a better job of judging you on what you actually did, what your actions actually were, instead of judging you on your personality or character, than strategy games do. And so that's another thing that keeps me coming back to strategy games. Sorry.
That's okay.
That's derailed, but
that's great.
It came back. Yeah.
The idea of people not knowing what cards do, my first thought is somebody should be introduced to Uno. You know, like that's like a very basic version of, here is a card, it does something.
But you know, that's not necessarily a game that everybody grew up playing.
Exactly.
I grew up playing card games, but some people didn't. And that is a thing that not everybody who's a strategy gamer realizes, I think. Sometimes people who build strategy games or who play and talk about strategy games make the assumption that, oh yeah, it's very natural for you to, like, have a character that represents a human and it's on a board in a square. And really, these are completely ludicrous abstractions that make no sense. But we had just all sort of accept that, like, yeah, that happens in strategy games, sure. And you have turns, which each turn represents 6 seconds. Like, does it? Like, what? That's very arbitrary and weird. But yeah.
It's still... I still find it weird that, obviously, there was that moment that Final Fantasy games went from turn-based strategy into fluid, and it was just, okay, now you can push the button, you can set up moves in advance that make the battle seem far more realistic. And for me, it was really hard for my brain to process that. And I think that's why I really loved Final Fantasy X, because it was like almost the last, I guess, of its kind, where it was just turn-based and you could sit there and think about what you had to do before making that decision. And I think it's something that I'm really hoping doesn't get lost in a world of games that a lot of the time things are downplayed and made easy for people. In terms of, people always want convenience, and in exchange for the convenience, you lose a lot of the aspects of what makes some games great. For example, playing through original Mario or whatever, back in the day, you'd work really hard. You'd play hours and hours to beat the game to get an unlock of somebody's character being green instead of red, or, you know, Link's pajamas that you can wear instead by playing through the entirety of the Wind Waker. It's, I guess, the beauty of the fact that you are working so hard for a cosmetic that really doesn't change anything about the game, but you invest so much time into that, I think is now almost, in some respects, maybe undermined by the fact that cosmetics can be bought, and the amount of money that generates has, or the pay to win aspects of games, I think is maybe detracting from what made hard games so beautiful to play.
There's a really, I think a huge moment in strategy gaming was when Diablo was released as a real-time game. In development, Diablo was a turn-based game, and it's sort of based on like the Dungeons and Dragons dungeon crawlers sort of thing, where you every turn you do an action and say you want to attack something. And when they were playtesting it, they kept on shortening the turns because it was like you want more fluidity to how the player is controlling this character. You want more moments where you can change what you're doing. And eventually they realized that it was just more fun if you made it real time. That's the most fluid that the turns can be. And real-time strategy and turn-based strategy are often very similar, other than the fact that they don't have turns anymore in real-time strategy. It's often the games have a lot of the same mechanics. Sometimes the games can be played either way. Like you can say, I want this to be turn-based, or I want to not have turns. Sometimes you can be like, I'd like it to pause every time that this happens, which basically means you're now playing a turn-based game, but it is actually real-time also. A big thing in real-time strategy, though, is real-time strategy does have like that instant gratification. It's like playing the FPS game almost. You're instantly reacting to the thing. You don't slow down in a real-time game and think for 5 minutes, because if you did, you'd like other things would happen and you'd lose. And that's one of the things that I think you're noticing, is like that mode of slowing down and thinking about something that's really hard, and you're not going to get through it if you don't think about it now. That's not necessarily what people respond to positively in games. This is a struggle for people who make strategy games, is like, it's not necessarily fun to do that. It's like, it's work, it's punishing. Sometimes you're wrong and it feels bad. Now, I really enjoy doing it. I find it rewarding. But not everybody does. And a lot of my viewers don't want to do that. They find it fun to watch me do it, but they don't personally want to do it when they play. So, yeah, that is definitely an interesting thing that's going on in gaming. And even Slay the Spire has instant gratification. Like, when you get offered a card, it doesn't just give you one card, it gives you a choice of 3, and you have to click a button to see them. That's a slot machine. That's true. That is just, and slot machines wire into the human brain in all sorts of ways that casinos know all about, because they use them to make tons of money. Humans like that instant gratification from a slot machine of seeing what you got, seeing that chance.
Or hitting the respawn button for many people in Call of Duty or whatever it is. Being able to push a button that restarts your experience, I think, is very gratifying to a lot of people. Again, that's probably why that blasted whale keeps throwing you back to the bottom of the Spire as well. You mentioned before, we were talking about the Instagram thing, and about how there's always going to be eyes on you in that regard. How do you deal with criticism in a job where people can scrutinize every decision that you make?
The incredibly blunt answer is taking advice from someone is work. It requires establishing that you trust that person and think that they know what's going on. It requires having a conversation with them and hearing what they're saying and understanding what they're saying and why they're saying it. And then it requires thinking about, am I going to implement whatever it is that they've said into my life? Can I find a way to do that? And there are maybe 5 people in my life who I take advice from, because that's about how many people in my life know enough about me and what makes me happy and what's important to me to be able to give me good advice. I don't give a fuck what anybody else says. That's the incredibly blunt answer. When somebody is critical of me, they don't have a clue what they're talking about, at least with regards to my life. They might say, oh, you should really hype up your content and smile more and be more energetic and stuff. And like, that criticism is completely irrelevant in every way to everything. Like, I'm not going to do that. That's not me.
Mm.
If they had hung out with me for the last few years, like people who I do trust advice from have, they would know that. They would know that that criticism is ludicrous. And so if someone's going to be critical in that way, I mean, the best thing is for them to just go find something that they do enjoy. Because like I can't be the thing that everybody wants me to be. The goal in streaming, you start out and you're like, well, I worked full-time as a streamer for a year and a half before I made minimum wage, basically. So at that point, you're like, can I do this as a job? I really need to like make everybody happy. If I lose someone, oh no, like what am I going to do? That was part of my paycheck. I remember having all of those neuroses and stuff going on when I was starting out as a streamer. But streaming is not a career where you like really get set promotions or anything. It's just like as you keep doing it and doing it well, like all the numbers just sort of go up, and you get, it's more like you unlock more and more things. And eventually you reach a point where it's like, okay, I'm making enough money. I'm confident in who I am. I know what it is that I want to do with my channel, and I'm going to continue doing that. And the decisions that you're making around streaming stop being about like, how am I going to do enough work to make rent? How am I going to satisfy the people who I'm trying to satisfy? And they start being like, what is it that I want to do in this space? And how do I line that up with the people who want to see that? I want to find the people who want to see me. I am not interested in being something other than me for people who want to see something else. And that was realizing that and really internalizing it. Like I had imposter syndrome as a streamer up until the beginning of last year, I would say, when I like worked through it pretty intently with a therapist to get to a point where I could be like, oh yeah, maybe I actually do deserve this and worked really hard for it and feel good about it. Getting to a point where I internalized that I'm me, I like doing things this way. There are lots of people who want to see that. If you're not a person who wants to see that and doesn't like me, you can go away. I'm here for the people who want what I am. Getting to that point was, I mean, that was sort of the dream. And my life has been very happy since I got to that point. A lot of the stress involved in streaming has just gone away.
I think that's firstly really awesome to hear. But secondly, incredibly relatable in terms of the fact that there are a lot of people out there that feel like you need to convey a certain emotion when a certain thing happens for them to get the gratification, and you're not doing it for them. You're doing it for you. And I think, you know, having known you, like I said, for about half a year, the fact is that in those moments when I see something really funny happen, or it tickles you, or the perfect card comes up in the perfect combination of moves, and you full on laugh about it, those moments are precious. And I would hate the idea. Hate's a strong word. I would I would not enjoy the idea of a disingenuous laugh coming across as, oh, well, I feel like I'm expected to react in this way because of the fact that something may have happened that might have been quite funny. Therefore, my content needs to be boosted by me doing this reaction. And I think that's what's always set you aside for me is the fact that you are incredibly real about when something entertains you, and I feel as though on the surface there are definitely moments where people might come into your chat and just think this guy is very mellow and chilled out for what he's doing, but those people aren't knowing you as a person, because even when you're in those mellow states, from my perspective, that doesn't mean you're not having fun. And I feel like that happens a lot in terms of Twitch streaming, where you get people who almost feel as though the volume level is the amount of fun you're having. So if you're not screaming your head off, then you're not having a good time. And there have definitely been people that have come into my chat and been like, hey, let's hype it up in here, let's pump it up. And I've had to turn around and be like, actually, we're having a really good time. And if you could read the room and understand that, that would be amazing. And those people have apologized, maybe gone away, found someone else that they could hype up, and they go get their gratification from somebody else. But you definitely need to be comfortable within your own skin to know that you are streaming as much for you as you are for other people that want to watch you. And if you're creating content that is not something that makes you inherently happy in doing it, then you are ultimately going to be creating this false like lie of what your life becomes. And the deeper you get into that, the harder it is to pull yourself back out from that.
Yeah, and the context is like, at the start of this, we talked about how I sat in a room with my grandfather, but we weren't talking, and read a book just full of chess moves for an hour every day and was enraptured by it. If someone comes into a channel and sees someone playing an incredibly challenging strategy game at an incredibly high level, and there are thousands of people there to talk with about it, and the person's explaining what's going on calmly and just talking through different decisions and stuff. If someone comes into the channel and finds that boring, like, that's them. They're not interested in it. It's not some external judgment about whether it's interesting or not. I can tell you it's incredibly interesting to me. And throughout my life, points of incredible joy in my life have been finding other people who think that's really, really interesting too, and becoming really good friends with those people, or having very interesting conversations with those people, or sharing experiences with those people. So yeah, there's definitely, as a mellow streamer, as a chill streamer, as somebody who's not acting up and somebody who's low volume level, there are definitely people who look at my content and think I'm making boring content, or think that I am bored as I'm making the content, or think that I find them boring as I respond to their question or whatever. And that's not what's going on, actually. I find it all interesting. Everything is very interesting.
What I find really great is that obviously you've played the game for a long time, and you'll play your own music like while you're playing the game, and obviously the music, people will hear the game music, but you'll be listening to your own tunes because obviously DMCA is a thing and stuff. And I just remember you talking about Fat Bottom Girls was playing by Queen at one point, and just, it's really nice to know that you're in the zone, having fun, listening to something that you enjoy listening to, whilst also entertaining literally thousands of people in terms of them seeing you in your comfort zone in many respects. And not only while you're doing that, you're also creating a financially stable job for you to be able to continue doing something that you love doing. And I think that is one of the many great things about streaming that often gets overlooked. People often think it's just you're playing a video game and you get paid to do that. That can't require much effort whatsoever. But in terms of the actual thought process behind what goes into sitting down and getting to a point where you feel comfortable enough to stream that, and then for people to find you and click with that content that they want to come back every day and watch it, that's magical. And I love that exists online. So I just saw one of your cats wander into stream.
Yeah, that's Sania.
And
Sania is a little bit of a scaredy cat.
Oh, bless. That's that. I have a question, which is, what's the best thing about being a cat dad, and what's it like owning pets and streaming?
Sure. Authenticity is one of the gold standards of streaming, by the way, just to tack on to your prior point. Like, absolutely, authenticity. Authenticity, authenticity. It's possible to win at streaming in other ways. I don't know if win's the right word, but it's possible to succeed as a streamer without being authentic. But a lot of the streamers that you see who are happy in their skin and doing the job that they love are there and succeeding in a large part because of their authenticity with their audience and community. Cats are awesome. When I was playing poker, I was dating someone who was going to UCLA, and I was playing poker online, so I could move wherever I wanted. So I was like, oh, I'll just move down to LA. I had just dropped out of my college at the University of Washington up in Seattle. And so I moved down to LA. I got an apartment near UCLA. She had like basically crash at my apartment weeknights and then go hang out with her family in the valley weekends, and it was just a really nice setup for us, but it was also sort of lonely for me. And so I got a couple of cats and adopted cats, and they have been incredible companions to me. One of them, when I moved back to Seattle, one of them didn't take to the move and escaped the house and left, and it was very sad. And I hope that she is living a happy life somewhere else. But that was always sort of her character. Her name's Sage, and Sage sort of adopted me a little bit. She like just went to somebody's backyard. She was maybe a stray cat or maybe somebody else's cat, but she didn't like staying put. She went to someone's backyard. She was pregnant. They found her and brought her into the vet, and she had her litter at the vet. And then when I went in to look for cats to adopt, she just like, I walked into this room and there were just cats everywhere. Probably 20 cats in the room. And they were just this was where they lived, and they all had their own comfortable spaces that were for them, but also it was daytime and they were allowed out to play if they wanted and stuff. And she had her son Zephyr playing with a little string on the floor, and she saw me walk in, and she just like came over and jumped up on my lap and just sat on my lap and looked up at me, and then like kept an eye on Zephyr to make sure that he was okay. He wasn't called Zephyr at the time, I guess. I called him that. And I just like I had been planning on one cat maybe, but I had to adopt both. It just couldn't not. So I got those two. Zephyr is still hanging out with me. I think he's in bed right now, cuddled up and asleep. He likes to, he has a better idea of when it's time to go to sleep than I do. So if I'm like working late hours, he'll like come sit on my desk and just like look at me sort of knowingly, like it's actually time to go to sleep now. And there's been more than one occasion where I've like decided to turn things off for the night because my cat has communicated that it would be appropriate.
That's awesome.
Xenia, who you just saw walk into the background, I found, well, my ex-girlfriend found on, like Ventura and Laurel Canyon in the valley. I think it was like a massive intersection. This is like an 8-lane road intersecting with a 4-lane road sort of thing. And Xenia was a feral cat who had gotten separated from her mother somehow, and she was just like in the gutter by herself, trying to get up on the sidewalk, but not strong enough to get from the gutter to the sidewalk. She was like malnourished. She had some sort of eye infection going on. And so my ex-girlfriend picked her up and brought her home, and she went and hid under the covers with me because I was still asleep. It was like pretty early in the morning. And then we took her into the vet and got her fixed up, and we wanted to like have her tested for FIV, the like cat version of HIV, basically, I think. And we needed to like wait 2 weeks to get those test results back, I think, and wanted to like give her some nice nourishing and stuff to get her back on her feet. And then we were planning to let her be adopted by somebody else. But she was locked in the bedroom because we didn't know what infectious diseases she had or didn't have. And the other cats were outside the bedroom. And they just like sat on opposite sides of the door from each other and meowed at each other. And she like pawed under the door and stuff. And after, I don't think we lasted 2 weeks. I think we lasted like 2 days or something. But it just seemed cruel. So we like tried opening the door for a second to see if they would like get along or if they'd hiss at each other or whatever. And she just like ran at Zephyr like she thought he was her mother. And he's a guy cat, so
of course
he's not her mother, but he sort of is.
Thanks for clarifying.
He also sort of is. Yeah. And they have just sort of been inseparable ever since. And I obviously failed to adopt her out to another family. I never got even a little bit close.
For good reason.
Yeah, they're very comfortable together, but Xenia has never been very comfortable with humans, and only slowly has she come to accept like sleeping in the same bed with us at night, and we're allowed to snuggle up and pet her and stuff if she's on the bed, but otherwise she likes to keep her distance. I can walk up to her and like offer her my hand for her to sniff at and say hi, but that's about it. Anyway, I'm gushing about my cats.
Everything on her terms.
One of the really nice things about having pets in the pandemic is you do have other living creatures to have emotional attachment to. And so maybe if I hadn't been sitting inside with only my partner for the last year pretty much, I wouldn't be quite so gushy. But I mean, yeah, these creatures at this point, Zephyr has been through more shit with me than any other living thing, I believe, in my life, and there's a huge amount of attachment and appreciation for that. Sometimes you just need a creature who will cuddle with you and not judge you. And a cat will usually cuddle with you and will never judge you.
Is Zephyr more of a traditional cat, I'd say, in terms of like will be able to be held and picked up and like, because you sometimes you get what I'd consider like cat dogs who are like super playful cats that want to play. I just wondered where he sort of sits on the scale in terms of, you said that your other cat is more of a scaredy cat.
Yeah, Zephyr will like, if he's in the right mood, he'll chase after a ball if you throw a ball for him, or you'll definitely play with toys with you and stuff. He's not always in that mood.
Yeah.
But he's very friendly. He comes and says hi when you come in from like a trip to the store or whatever. What things do people even go outside for now? If you went to get the mail, like, yeah.
In the UK, we just have letterboxes directly into our doors.
Fair enough.
Yeah, so don't need to go outside to a mailbox.
We have a mailbox in our apartment complex, which is like 2 minutes walk away, and that's often the excursion for the day, is a 2-minute walk to the mailbox.
I was going to say, obviously, you've just brought that up, but one of the questions I have here was, how do you like to unwind after a stream? Considering a stream for you is potentially like 12 hours of solid strategy.
I aim for 6 or 7 hours, I would say. That's my goal for a day in the office as a streamer. And when you consider I don't take weekends almost ever, that adds up to a lot of hours every month.
Yes.
But I generally frame my stream. I'm an introvert, and I generally frame my stream as what I'm going to pour the emotional energy that I have that day into. give 95% of my emotional energy per day to my stream. And I have 5% left for my relationship with Caitlin and for keeping in touch with IRL friends, or for keeping in touch with online friends, or reaching out to people about other things. As I've started to make more money as a streamer, I like now hire people who do emotional labor for me. Like if there are emails to send about a sponsorship opportunity, I have somebody else who does that entire chain of emailing for me. And like I really put as much as I can into the stream in terms of my emotional energy. I love conversations like this because it's a chance to spend emotional energy on something that's unique and enjoyable and fun in a different way. And I feel like I'm making content, so I can sort of like write it off as work hours.
Yeah.
Because it's a nice, I don't have many conversations like this outside of streaming because I don't have the energy for them anymore. After I've talked to 2,000 people for 7 hours, I just want to go for a walk by myself, watch a show on Netflix, hang out with my cats, order food and eat some food while I'm watching a Teamfight Tactics stream or something. Sometimes I'll play games on my own off stream. Some games don't stream very well. Like, it's just too hard for a viewer to tell what's going on, or sometimes a game is like, well, very little actually changes on the screen and most of the game is like thinking in your head and then doing one thing every 5 minutes. So there are games like that I really enjoy playing, but I wouldn't stream very much because I don't think they're that interesting to watch, and also they're not very interesting for me to make fun to watch. And so sometimes I'll play those games while I'm done with my stream. I tend to live a pretty calm life while I'm streaming and while I'm not streaming. I mean, if you get me at karaoke with some drinks, I go off. But, you know, I'm not incapable of having fun or letting my hair down or anything. But I'm also very comfortable being chill.
Yeah. As someone who's experienced your voice acting of playing D&D with you and hearing you, sort of seeing you let your hair down, I know that side's a treat to be able to witness, for sure. You said something in there that I'm trying to get back to, and I can't quite remember either. God, we really are in our 30s. This is the second time today that one of us has forgotten immediately what the other person was talking about.
It's always happened to me. I'm just sharper than I was before.
I've remembered.
Just nothing. I'm being sarcastic. What have you remembered?
You said that you pour so much of your emotional self into your stream, and that you have little left for the rest of the day as such. And like I've streamed for 7 hours today as well, was what I was going to bring up. And then obviously I was trying to find time to fit in a guest for the podcast this week, and fortunately you were available, which is awesome. And I'm very blessed to be able to be in this position as well, talking to somebody that I massively respect. But again, I think it says a lot that that when it comes to content creation, people often just think about your day in terms of the block of time that they see you live, and that is your day. You don't exist outside of that. So when you come online, people go, hey, this is the time that they should be upbeat and doing what they do, because this is the only time that they exist. And I think that sometimes can be really hard for people to process that there are other hours in the day where we do need to unwind or relax, or, you know, I'll rewatch like The Office or something in my spare time, or watch a show on Netflix just purely based on the fact that that's how I unwind. The nice thing at the moment about Netflix, if they ever want to sponsor the podcast, but is the fact that you can have like a picture in picture, so I can have that and also play Marvel Strike Force or whatever it's called, the sort of mobile game that I'll play underneath it. So I can chill and play something that's like a mobile game and sort of get that strategy part of my brain working while also putting on some nonchalant comedy in the background. So I think that definitely is.
Yeah, it sounds like a good evening.
Exactly, yeah. So there are like only a couple of games I play on my mobile because I just, after sitting at your desk for hours on end, it's so nice to just get up and go somewhere else, you know? So I think that's very important.
Yeah. One of the big things with that too is people expect you to be a particular brand as a streamer. And humans aren't the same every day.
True.
Like, generally speaking, some days you're feeling sad, some days you're feeling happy, some days you're energetic, some days you're creative, some days you just want to cuddle up in a ball all day, some days you have a cold, you're feeling sick. But people don't interface with you as a human very well. They interface with you as a type of content that they consume, and they expect that content to be a certain way. And so when you turn on your stream, like, even if I'm feeling great on a day, like if I'm feeling better than usual, all of a sudden my viewers are like, whoa, this was a little bit too excitable, and I use this content to wind down and go to sleep, and I like this wasn't my favorite one of yours. And I'm like, did I do something wrong? Like, I was feeling great that day and brought some awesome energy. But, you know, like, people don't interface with you as a human being. They interface with you as a source of content. And there are some people in my community who do interface with me as a human being. And I think that's my dream as a streamer, is I sort of think about, I have this inner circle of viewers who, they're on the Discord and they're chatting with me and they understand my interests away from the stream and like know the name of my partner and my cats, and they know what book I've been reading because I mentioned it on the Discord, and all of this stuff. They understand that some days I'm excited and some days I'm tired and some days I'm whatever. And for me, it's often an interesting tug of war between how many people I'm able to bring into that inner circle so that I have a community of viewers who treat me like a human being. And it makes me really happy to have all these people treat me like a human being. That's so awesome. Wonderful. But also, you have the outer circle of people who like, well, I found about you on Reddit and watched a couple of your videos. That's what I understand you to be. I watch your YouTube content and expect it to be the same thing because I use it for a certain thing in my life. I use it to wind down in the evening. It is a commodity that I am using for value personally. There are a lot of people who interact with my content like that, and that's cool. That I'm glad that I create value in the world, right? But when you're talking about what work goes into streaming, I think it's easy to not recognize how much work it is to take yourself as a ever-changing human being and create a branded type of content 40 plus hours a week that all manner of other people expect to be able to use in a certain way that you didn't even necessarily intend for. You didn't even ask. I didn't ask for like some guy in Minnesota to be able to use my videos to go to sleep at night because he has trouble winding down in the evenings. I never woke up in the morning and thought that's the content I'll create, but that's a way that it gets used. And while it is really cool, it also means that there's work involved for me to create that sort of content. Again, it means I feel some sort of responsibility or obligation to keep making that thing so that that person can use it in that way, whether I want to or not. And that can be a lot. That can be draining. People can get stuck making the same thing over and over again because so many of the people who care about them as a content creator care about the fact that they make that thing instead of caring about the fact that like they are a human who is cool. But that's the dream, right? That they think you're a human who's cool and they just want to like tune into your channel because you are that human and you're cool and they like being there.
I feel like the hardest real-time strategy game and yet most rewarding is being human, most probably.
Yeah.
And that concludes this week's episode of the podcast. I really hope you've enjoyed. There is more to come. Next week will be the second half of the podcast with Jorbs. He has a ton of amazing info, and we have a really good discussion about streaming as well. So please make sure you check that out. I just want to say a huge shout out to our Patreons as well, or patrons, I should say, over on Patreon. I've been uploading extra bonus footage, bonus videos on the Patreon as well. So if you do want to go check that out, then feel free to head on over to patreon.com/streamerconsciousness as well. Thank you guys so much for listening, and I'll see you in the next episode.